My name is David Monroe. I'm 42 years old, and until recently, I believed I understood honesty. Not the kind people talk about in therapy sessions or post online. I'm talking about the kind that costs you something. Truth that risks comfort. The kind I built my marriage on. My wife, Claire, once told me she'd rather hear an ugly truth than live with a beautiful lie. That was 2 years ago, sitting on our deck in North Seattle, rain misting the railings, coffee cooling between us. I remember her words because they were the start of something I didn't recognize at the time, a test wrapped in trust. We'd been married 12 years. No scandals, no late-night arguments. Just two people moving efficiently through a life we built together. A mortgage, a 6-year-old daughter, and a quiet kind of love that felt like order. Claire's best friend, Nora, had been in that picture almost as long as I had. Art teacher, divorced. The kind of woman who smiled easily and noticed details. The kind that made you feel seen without effort. One night, over wine, Claire looked at me and said something that didn't fit our world at all. "If you ever wanted to sleep with Nora," she said, "I'd be okay with it. I trust you." I laughed at first. She didn't. "You're serious?" I asked. She shrugged. "It's just a body, David. We're adults. You'd tell me, and we'd be fine." I didn't respond. I just watched her sip her wine like it was a scientific statement. Most men would have taken it as permission. I took it as data, an emotional variable I didn't yet understand. People show you who they are in small experiments. That night was hers, and I decided to pass the test, not by acting, but by observing. 2 weeks later, Nora stopped by with her usual warmth. Wine, jokes, stories about her students. But something in her eyes had shifted. A kind of curiosity that hadn't been there before. It wasn't flirtation exactly. It was expectation. The kind that only appears after someone has given quiet approval behind closed doors. That's when I realized something simple. Claire wasn't testing my fidelity. She was measuring her power. When someone tells you they'd be fine if you betrayed them, what they're really saying is they've already found a justification to do it first. I didn't confront her. I did what I always do. I started recording patterns. Timestamps. Tone changes. The way her phone faced down more often. The small hesitations between text vibrations and her replies. It's not paranoia when your instincts have been right before. Trust doesn't break in explosions. It decays, quietly, methodically, one rationalization at a time. By the end of that month, I had enough data to know what most husbands never want to confirm. Claire wasn't preparing for an affair. She was already justifying one. Seattle rain has a rhythm. It never storms, it lingers. That's how Claire's deception began, not as thunder, but drizzle. Barely noticeable unless you stand in it long enough. And I've been standing there for months. I work in network forensics, tracing data breaches, reconstructing digital footprints. My job is to find truth in noise. Turns out marriage isn't much different. You look for what doesn't fit the established pattern, the missing log, the altered connection, the late-night message disguised as routine. Claire had her own rhythm. Morning runs along Green Lake before sunrise. Shower not long after. Coffee, emails, commute. Her predictability used to comfort me. Then she started changing routes, cutting workouts short, coming home with excuses that sounded rehearsed. One Thursday, her watch buzzed on the counter while she was upstairs. A notification flashed. "See you soon, winky face," from Tyler Brooks. My best friend since college. Marine Corps together, started our own IT consulting firm, built it from nothing. Trust wasn't just emotional, it was operational. Tyler handled our clients. I handled the back end. We'd spent 15 years building each other's credibility. I stared at that message for a long moment. Didn't react. Didn't touch her phone. Just noted the minute her private world bled into mine. The moment my professional instinct replaced my personal one. That night, I backed up our home router logs. Most people don't realize Wi-Fi remembers everything. Every device, every session, every data packet. You don't need to hack a phone if you already control the network it connects to. 2 hours later, I had what I needed. Connections showing Claire's phone linking to an unfamiliar address 4 blocks from Tyler's condo. Several evenings in a single week, always between dinner and dusk. She'd told me she was at Pilates. Tyler had told me he was meeting clients. Funny how often liars synchronize their stories. Still, I said nothing. Truth isn't something you demand. It's something you build. I began subtle adjustments, a mirror of her own. Came home later than usual. Stopped volunteering details about my day. When you mirror a deceiver, they reveal themselves faster. Within a week, she started asking questions she'd never cared about before. How late were you working? Who were you with? The same questions I'd been too polite to ask her. I looked her in the eye one evening and asked, "Would you really be fine if I took you up on what you said? About Nora?" She hesitated, just long enough to expose the truth. "Sure," she said finally, "if it meant something to you." That pause told me everything. She didn't expect me to say it again. Because she wasn't joking the first time, she was distracting. Guilt loves symmetry. If she could make me complicit, she'd feel less exposed. A few nights later, Tyler texted, "Man, need to talk. Claire mentioned you've been distant. Everything okay?" I didn't reply. When a guilty man checks your emotional temperature, it's not concern, it's surveillance. The next morning, I stood in my office window watching the rain slide down the glass, realizing something clear. My marriage wasn't ending in betrayal. It was being engineered. And both of them thought they were smarter than me. They were wrong. I wasn't angry. I was awake. And when a man like me wakes up, he doesn't explode. He plans. The first rule of investigation is patience. The second is silence. You don't confront a liar when they're still confident. You let them keep performing. Because performance always produces evidence. I started small. Installed a new home security system. Told Claire it was for insurance purposes. The cameras weren't for burglars. They were for truth. One in the kitchen smoke detector, another in the den vent, a third disguised as a motion sensor near the back door. All discreet. All recording to a private server she didn't know existed. In my office, I mirrored our business emails to an encrypted folder. If Tyler and Claire were communicating outside work, eventually they'd slip. Adultery isn't impulsive, it's logistical. And logistics leave trails. Claire began dressing differently for her supposed workouts. Less athletic, more deliberate. Hairstyled, perfume stronger, makeup precise. I didn't comment. Observation beats accusation. I made sure she saw me buried in spreadsheets, conference calls, late projects. The illusion of distraction was part of the trap. Every deceiver needs the comfort of believing they're undetected. A few Fridays later, she told me Nora wanted to meet for drinks. That caught my attention. Nora hadn't reached out in weeks. So I texted her directly. "Hey, Claire mentioned drinks tonight. Where are you two headed?" Her reply came fast. "What drinks?" There it was, confirmation in 2 words. The alibi had a name, but not a witness. Classic. I waited until Claire left the house, then checked the camera feed. She backed out of the driveway wearing a dress I'd never seen before, the kind that wasn't meant for casual drinks. Not long after, her car's GPS pinged from a side street near Tyler's condo. Then silence. I didn't follow. Didn't need to. The data would do the watching for me. When she returned home later that night, her lipstick was gone, perfume faint, hair slightly undone. She kissed me goodnight like nothing had changed. But her voice was off, light, almost relieved. That's what guilt sounds like before it hardens. The next morning, I watched her make breakfast for our daughter, humming softly. I felt no rage, just clarity. When a man like me sees the pattern complete, emotion becomes irrelevant. You stop asking why and start calculating how. That's when I made my decision. I wouldn't confront her. Not yet. She and Tyler wanted to build their secret. I'd let them. But I'd own the foundation. And when the time came, I'd bring the whole structure down, quietly, piece by piece. Every betrayal has a rhythm, and theirs began to pulse in predictable waves. Morning tension, midday silence, evening smiles that didn't reach the eyes. Routine, the camouflage of liars. I decided to trace the signal itself. Every phone leaves fingerprints, Wi-Fi handshakes, Bluetooth echoes, GPS drift. Claire's phone connected to the same unknown network 3 evenings in a row. The same network Tyler used for his home office. I'd installed that router myself 5 years earlier when we upgraded his servers. Back then, I set an admin password only I knew. He never changed it. It took 30 seconds to log in. The system showed 2 primary devices, Tyler's desktop and Claire's phone. Both active, both streaming data. She wasn't just visiting. She was staying long enough to connect, upload, and sync. That told me more than any text message could. The next phase was human behavior. Tyler had always been predictable. Gym in the mornings, happy hour on Thursdays, poker night every other weekend. I shadowed his schedule without being seen, making note of the hours Claire's car wasn't home. Their patterns overlapped perfectly. It wasn't an affair born of passion. It was built on planning, rehearsed, maintained, hidden with care. So I began building my own web. A mirrored server that archived every message from our shared business cloud. A GPS tag inside the key fob of Claire's car. A motion-triggered mic beneath Tyler's office desk. If they wanted secrecy, they'd have to build it on my systems. By the second week, the pieces aligned. Friday evening, both devices went dark for 4 hours. No data, no calls, no movement. When systems go silent, it means someone's hiding. The next morning, both phones reconnected to our home network within minutes of each other. Claire came into the kitchen humming, wearing the same earrings I'd seen reflected in Tyler's office webcam the night before. Proof was no longer the goal. I had enough to burn them both down. But men like me don't burn things, we dismantle them. Piece by piece, until truth becomes undeniable even to the liars themselves. That night, I sat on the porch watching the rain thread down the railing, a quiet satisfaction settling in my chest. The trap was already closed. They just hadn't realized it yet. What they didn't know was that every message, every photo, every whisper they shared existed twice. Once in their world, and once in mine. And in my version, I decided when the story ended. Once you have truth, the next step is control. Not confrontation, control. A liar will always expose more when they think they're safe. So I gave them exactly that. Claire started bringing up Tyler more often, like she was testing how much I suspected. He seems lonely, she'd say casually over dinner. You should call him sometime. I nodded, pretending not to notice how her eyes lingered, waiting for a reaction. When none came, she relaxed. Comfort is a drug to the guilty. I called Tyler that weekend. Kept my voice steady, friendly. Took your advice, I said. Gave Claire some space lately. Figured you'd know how to handle that kind of thing. He laughed, but it cracked halfway through. Guilt distorts sound. I've heard it 100 times during interrogations. He muttered something about balance and hung up early. That was fine. The seed was planted. Next, I fed them both information, small lies with sharp edges. I mentioned a new client in Tacoma, late nights at the office, overnight meetings. All untrue. But by the following week, Claire had plans of her own. Work dinners, yoga retreats, excuses that matched mine too perfectly to be coincidence. They believed they had freedom. In reality, I'd just given them a sandbox to play in while I built the walls around it. At home, I acted normal. Cooked dinner, read bedtime stories, even kissed Claire goodnight. Every gesture was bait. The calmer I was, the bolder she became. People mistake silence for ignorance. In truth, silence is the sound of calculation. By the third week, they couldn't help themselves. I caught a brief video feed of Tyler's hand brushing her arm in his office. A second later, her face turned toward him, hesitation, then surrender. I stopped the recording there. Not because I couldn't watch, but because I didn't need to. The data had done its job. The next morning, I sent Tyler a test message from our business email. We need to talk about the client file you've been accessing. No client existed. I just wanted to see who would panic first. 3 minutes later, Claire texted me. Everything okay at work? Tyler said you seemed upset. Perfect. Now I knew they were in direct communication during business hours, violating company protocol and their own secrecy. The game had officially turned. I wasn't chasing betrayal anymore. I was directing it. And when you start controlling the narrative, you no longer play the role of the victim. You become the author. Control isn't about shouting louder. It's about knowing what someone will do before they do it. By then, I could map Claire and Tyler's choices like code. Every text, every call, every excuse followed a pattern, predictable as rainfall in March. I started redirecting that pattern. At work, I told Tyler our systems had been showing strange access attempts. He brushed it off, nervous laugh, eyes darting, classic tell. When I mentioned installing a new audit tool, his pulse quickened. People forget how easily nervousness breathes through silence. Meanwhile, I created a dummy client folder labeled Sensitive Contracts. Inside were fake documents with subtle tracking codes. Anyone who opened or shared them would reveal their identity instantly. Within 2 days, the files were accessed from Tyler's laptop and again from Claire's tablet. That gave me a digital signature linking them both. They weren't just betraying me personally. They were now violating our company's confidentiality agreements. Criminal territory. I didn't confront him. I promoted him. Told him he'd be managing a new client relationship, one that required discretion. He smiled like a man who'd just gotten away with something. That's the look I wanted. At home, Claire seemed lighter. She'd laugh at little things, text more, spend longer in front of the mirror. Guilt had become confidence. It always does right before it collapses. One night, she poured 2 glasses of wine and asked, "Do you ever think about what trust really means?" "Every day," I said. "It's built on information. Lose that, you lose everything." She smiled, not realizing she was confirming exactly what I meant. The next morning, I sent both of them an identical message from an anonymous account. "You're not as hidden as you think." Within an hour, Claire deleted her text history. Tyler disconnected his office computer from the network. Their guilt had turned into fear, and fear makes people sloppy. That weekend, I found what I'd been waiting for, a set of private messages stored on a shared backup drive. Photos, meeting notes, whispers disguised as digital drafts. It was all there, the entire architecture of their affair preserved in metadata. They thought they were erasing evidence. They were actually creating mine. As I archived the final batch of files, I felt the shift. The moment control became power. It wasn't about hurting them anymore. It was about defining how their story ended. Justice doesn't shout. It waits, patient and precise, until silence becomes unbearable. By now, everything was ready. The evidence, the timing, the silence, all pieces of a structure they had built and I had fortified. The trick wasn't proving the affair. That was easy. The trick was revealing it in a way that made their lies self-destruct. I began with a simple calendar invitation. Company meeting, Monday morning, main conference room. Topic: Data Integrity Review. Attendees: myself, Tyler, and Claire. Neither of them knew the other was invited. That weekend, I behaved as usual. Dinner at home, bedtime stories for our daughter, quiet conversation by the fire. Claire looked relaxed again, as if her guilt had finally settled into comfort. She even reached for my hand that night. I let her. The hardest part of deception is pretending you still need to. When Monday came, I arrived early, set up the projector, and connected my laptop. At 9 sharp, Tyler walked in, smiling too quickly. A minute later, Claire appeared at the door, froze when she saw him. Her lips parted just enough to whisper his name. "Good," I said. "You're both here. Saves me time." I opened a folder labeled Network Review. Inside were screenshots, her phone connecting to his Wi-Fi, the emails, the photos, every private message they thought they'd deleted. Each slide came with silence, so heavy it almost hummed. "Everything you've hidden," I said calmly, "was built on my systems. You used my servers, my security, my trust." Claire's voice cracked. "David, please." Tyler stepped forward, trying to sound rational. "Man, this isn't what you think." I looked at him, steady. "I think it's exactly what it looks like." Then I showed the final slide, their names attached to the fake, sensitive contracts file. A timestamp proving they'd violated company data policies. Not just adultery, corporate misconduct. Tyler's face drained of color. He knew what that meant: termination, legal exposure, potential charges. Claire just stared, realizing her affair had turned into evidence admissible in court. I stood, closed the laptop, and said the words I'd been saving. "I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to document what happened. I'll be filing this with HR and my attorney. After that, we're done." Claire reached out, tears finally surfacing. "You don't have to ruin us." I paused at the door. "You did that yourselves. I'm just writing the report." I walked out into the gray morning air, calm, measured, finished. By noon, HR had everything. By evening, Tyler was suspended pending investigation. By nightfall, Claire was gone from the house, suitcase, silence, and nothing else. I poured a whiskey and watched the rain move across the window, slow and deliberate. Justice wasn't loud that day. It was quiet, surgical, final. The house was quiet for the first time in months. No footsteps, no phone alerts, no polite laughter echoing from the kitchen. Just stillness, the kind that follows after a storm finally runs out of rain. Claire had moved out that night, left a note on the counter that said, "I never meant to hurt you." I read it once, folded it, and dropped it into the trash. Intentions mean nothing once the damage is done. Tyler resigned 2 days later. HR called it mutual separation. But the board knew what had happened: breach of confidentiality, ethics violations, destruction of trust. He lost his position, his reputation, and the contract we'd spent 10 years building together. No one fired him. He fired himself the moment he mistook my silence for weakness. Claire's attorney reached out next, talk of divorce terms, custody, and equitable distribution. I didn't argue. I simply provided the evidence package I'd prepared: financial logs, text archives, and proof of professional misconduct. Her lawyer called it devastating documentation. Within a week, they withdrew every demand. I kept the house, the company, and full custody of our daughter. Claire received a small settlement, barely enough to rent the kind of apartment she used to look down on. I didn't celebrate. Justice isn't celebration, it's balance restored. The night the papers were finalized, I sat on the back porch with a glass of whiskey, listening to the rain slide through the gutters. Seattle at dusk has a certain honesty, gray, quiet, without pretense. It felt fitting. Months passed. Work grew stronger than before. New contracts, new clients, people drawn to precision and reliability. My employees never asked about Tyler. They didn't have to. They saw the efficiency that follows when a parasite is removed. As for Claire, word drifted back in fragments. Short-term jobs, restless moves, a life built on temporary things. I didn't follow her story. You can't rebuild peace while tracking chaos. One evening, I found an old photo in the garage, the four of us at a barbecue, before deceit became oxygen. Claire smiling beside me, Tyler holding a beer, Nora laughing off camera. For a moment, I felt the echo of what we once pretended to be. Then I set it back in the box where it belonged, with things that no longer define me. People sometimes ask if I ever regret not confronting them sooner. I don't, because the truth doesn't need urgency. It just needs space to grow undeniable. Trust doesn't end in shouting matches or slammed doors. It ends in silence, when evidence replaces emotion and calm becomes your last weapon. That's what I learned. Revenge is reaction. Justice is preparation. And peace is what's left when both are finished. I still watch the rain sometimes, tracing every drop as it falls through the gray light. It doesn't rush. It doesn't rage. It simply follows gravity, steady, certain, inevitable, just like the truth. If you like this story, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts below. Haven't subscribed yet? Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next one. Thanks for watching. See you in the next story.